Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Tuesday. It's December 11th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And real quickly before I forget, there won't be. I will do a chart lesson tomorrow afternoon, but there won't be a mid-morning uh, chart put up on the website because I have a dentist appointment that I'd forgotten about, and so I will not be in the office until sometime late morning or after lunch tomorrow. So, but I will do a chart lesson tomorrow afternoon, so no worries on that. But there won't be a mid-morning chart tomorrow. So, and there wasn't one yesterday. Actually, I did one, and there's been a software upgrade, and for some reason now you got to hit the publish button twice to publish it. And so I thought it was published because I did hit the publish button, but when somebody sent me a message and said that it wasn't up there. I'm like, sure it is. And I went back and sure it wasn't. So, uh, my bad there, but it's some kind of software change and you got to publish it twice. You got to hit the button twice to make it publish. So, um, I hate those upgrades. But anyway, um, yes, no mid-morning chart lesson tomorrow, but there will be a YouTube lesson because I will be back to the office before at least by lunch or so, after lunch anyway. But anyway, let's get to the day. We had a real strong continuation. This is just like a really strong uptrend during the overnight. And generally, what will happen on these trades like this is sometimes the trend will continue on, but a lot of times the trend will just what this does is this is where the market opened at 8:30. Well, this is where it closed yesterday. So even though on this chart there's no gap, on a daily chart there would be a gap between here and where it opens. And generally those gaps will fill rather quickly. And generally a lot of times they'll fill on the same day. It's not 100%. Sometimes the trend will continue on, but most of the time I would look for some kind of for prices to sell off at some point to come back and try to fill that gap so that because the charts do not like gaps. And so just something to think about there. But anyway, we trended up real strongly during the overnight right into the open and it just went flat. And you can see that. And finally we started expanding a little bit. There's a two-tiered channel here. I'm sorry, not a two-tiered channel, a two-tiered range across here. Fairly consistent across the highs. The lows started out being consistent. They kind of dropped down to these lows. They weren't quite as consistent as the highs were, but and then the downtrend started, and boom, it was off to the races. We bounced a little bit into the close, but or into the afternoon, I should say, and in the close we sold back off again. Quite a bit off the lows of the day, but still we sold back off a little bit. So I'm going to back out. We'll talk about these trades. We'll wrap up today. And let me back out here where it's a little bigger. Try to get it big enough where you can see the chart. But there were a couple of trades early on. Notice we had this strong trend working up. I believe there's a two-tier channel here. It didn't really help you a whole lot. You might have taken this trade right here. I didn't mark it because it's right into that midline. And there's a failed second entry short right there. But again, you've already had a break and a new high, and you're real close to these highs. So, and this is really your signal bar. Doesn't really matter on a failed second entry what your signal bar looks like so much because it's more of a trap. But this is one that you could have argued to be green here. We'll talk about it when we get to it. I didn't mark it, but it does appear to be a two-tier channel. We did get another break or close outside right here, and we never got a new high. But there was a close down here. But a lot of times when you get a close outside during the overnight, you can just almost ignore it if you come back and the trend starts holding again. But it didn't really hold here. We kind of broke on down. So really you were better off playing this steep one here and then the two legs up and then just playing it sideways. I think that was the better play, to be honest with you. So, but let's talk about the trades and move on. This part right in here is just way I need to start putting this. It's just way too tight. I don't see anything. Maybe that trade right here is another one, possibility. But I'm going to go ahead and make this. I don't think you really want to. I think you're better off to stay out of that trade, out of that area. It's just really congested across there, and it's pretty tight. Now this is a failed break lower, and notice there's a double top, so it's a first entry, second entry, so that's a possibility. Again, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. But we had this strong trend coming up. We had a break, we had a leg up, we started lower. This one was tempting because you could look at that. That is a second entry. Notice the high, first entry, and then second entry. But we've already had a break and a new high and a double top. So I'd want to wait on a higher low, which comes here. And then you get a failed second entry short here, and they're all right off the high of that EMA. You could take either one of those or even add on, and you might even argue for that one right there. It's a little bit congested. It looks like a little drop down. So you might even argue for that one to be green right there. But this was a fairly nice trade right out of the gate, and then we just kind of went sideways. Working across here, and like I said, there's actually another second entry long here. Notice this one pull back first entry, pull back second entry, but we've already had this break, a couple of legs up. There is another little short-term trend working here, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything because this was your main play up during the overnight, and then you have your break in two legs. So I was a little leery about going long right there, but that's another one you could even argue that maybe it should be green. It's a little small, relatively bullish bar. But once we started going sideways here, you don't want to be entering. I don't have the line there, but you can see this was originally like right across here. That's just really tight. And so you don't really have room in there to do much, and you could have considered this a little failed break lower, and it is a second entry, so that's the reason I said maybe you take that one. You get a double test even right here. You get a higher low here, a double test here, but look how close those highs are right across there. And you just don't have much room. And then you get another bounce here. That's a double test right there, but there's just not much room. And then you get a little failed break here, but then you got to go long right at the high, so you're better off to look for a short. This is a pretty good setup here. I didn't mark it red because you're better off to wait on the lower high, and you actually get a lower high here, but it's right into the lows. But you get a lower high right here after a second entry long. I skipped over the long right here. Notice you're coming down first entry, then pull back second entry, and now you got a double test of this area. Nice bullish bar. I like that when you got plenty of room to get out. Runs up, turns right back down. This is a lower high than this one, and it's right off those highs, so I'm okay with that one. And then you get another little double top right there and another bearish bar on the second entry short. Notice that low, first entry, second entry. And of course you get a little failed drop down here. But you want to wait on that higher low, which doesn't come till here, and then you ain't got much room. You might have looked at this one as a failed second entry short. Notice that low, first entry, second entry. Not a great bar though. It's almost neutral, but it does close in the upper half. But again, I think you're better off to wait on a higher low, which comes here, and that's right back into the highs again. Then you get another little nice bar up here at the top, but it's a doji, a perfect doji. I don't like that one. It does take off and run, but you need to wait on a lower high there, and you just don't get one till way down here. And just stay out of that right there. Somebody, I think, actually asked me about a second entry right here. I think they had a second entry. If it wasn't this particular setup, it was one that looked almost exactly like it. And I think they went long right in here. On their chart, it was a second entry, and then it failed on them, of course, and went higher. But hopefully you can see you got this trend line working down. That's your first break. You're going to look for a possible new low. This is very congestive. There's definitely a doji in there. You just want to stay out. This is like a little failed break lower out of this congestion. So if you should be looking for a long here if you're looking for anything, but that's just not a very good setup. You get a higher low right here. It's right into the midline, but it's above the EMA, and it is the first close outside that trend line. So you're probably going to try to shoot up here to this side. So maybe you take that one, but you got to be concerned because it's into the midline. And you get another break at a new high, but again, I like waiting on the lower high, which doesn't come till right here, and you're right back into the double bottom in that midline. I'm not crazy about that one. This is another one you could probably argue for green. I mean, if you want to be aggressive, there's probably nothing wrong with that trade. And then, of course, the lower high I just talked about. I'm just not crazy about it with all that support right across there. And then the midline right here as well. And it does bounce down here at the lows, but you're still inside that trend line. And you get a first entry, a second entry, it fails. That's a lower high right there, big bearish bar, and you're below, you know, it's still closed at the above the midline, but you're really, if it breaks lower here, you're below it. So I like that one. Just looking for it to run back down here, but this thing takes off. This would have been a nice runner here, and it's a definite failed second entry long. And look at it coming down. And this was the second entry long, but this is your signal bar, very bearish. And so you can't go long there in case anybody asks about that one. Then we drop down, and we're just kind of working down. I don't see anything in here I really like. There's a second entry short right here, but that's too bullish of a bar. And then finally you make a low, first entry, work up second entry, and there's a shorter term, the brown, you can see the reddish brown two-tiered channel. There's two channels here. That was what I started off playing, but you can see it ended up being another two-tiered flatter channel down through here. And that's a perfect second entry short with a big bearish bar right off that brown or reddish kind of brown trend line. And then you get another second entry short right there, double top, relatively bearish bar. There's a lower high right here, but there's not much room right there. And that bar, it is bearish, but it's not, I'm just not crazy about that one. And then you get another second entry short right here, same thing off that line again, but that bar is too bullish. And then you get another lower high here, first real close outside the red or brownish trend line, but that bar is too neutral to too bullish. And then this one would have been a nice failed second entry long, but it's right into the lows there, and you got a double bottom. I just wouldn't, I think that's a bad place. You see, you would have got burned. And we're just kind of working across here at another range. It doesn't have very many good setups. And then finally we get a failed breakout here, and it's off this other. And what I did was draw this trend line off these lows and drag it up here just in case. And it does turn down right off of it. It's not real. It's more of a, it's more bearish than it is bullish, but it's almost a neutral bar, and I don't like it. I did mark it green just because it does confirm that trend line, but I think you want to wait for a little more evidence on that trend line. It takes off, and it's a shame we didn't get a good signal bar. If you had a good signal bar there, I'd be all over that one because it is a failed break out of this trading range. Down it goes, and then now we're just too far away. We've already had a break of the red one and a new low in place, and so with this being the low of the blue one, you can kind of see prices working, and we finally overshoot it. Then we reverse, and then you get a first entry and then a second entry, and it fails instantly with a bearish bar. And I like going short there. There's a second entry short right here that you might have considered, but that's the first close outside, and we're trying to go higher. And so it's a chance we may try to go higher again, which we do, but you could have scalped out of that one. And that is right at the midline, but we had this overshoot. I mean, it's another one you could argue for it to be green if you wanted to be aggressive. I think you're better off to skip it. It's been too many good trades, and of course, just a few minutes later, you get a good setup right there. and off it goes. And then of course it bounces. You draw that trend line, it bounces again here. This is one you might have considered going long just to ride it back to here. I didn't mark it. It's a little bit risky, but it's a possibility, especially when it breaks lower right there, because that probably fooled some people that didn't draw their trend line right there. They said, oh, it's a failed breakout. It's going to be a trap. Look how bearish. And notice how it ticks one. I don't know if you can see that or not. It ticks one tick lower and reverses. So that one is one that you could argue for. Just to ride it back to here. I won't give it blue because you'd be counter trend trading to some degree, but we did have an overshoot. And you would expect if prices shoot higher here, we're going back to the trend line, there's plenty of room. But notice when we get up here, it turns down, and it's just working down this trend line. And finally, you get a lower high here, and you do have enough room before coming back to here, even if this is still in play. But this is your bigger pattern, your main pattern. I'm going to take that trade right there. It doesn't take off, but it keeps working lower. And you get another turn down off that trend line right there, but the bar's too neutral. And you get a lower high here, but there's not much room. We bounced all across here several times. Not a good setup. And it bounces. Not a good signal bar here, but you get a lower high right here. And that's a second entry short. Notice that low, first entry, second entry. There's really two little legs up right there, but that's a nice bearish bar off a shorter term trend line there on the first break of this main channel. So you know we're probably trying to go lower. So there is a gap in there. So I don't know if you could have got in this trade or not. Depending on how your chart sets up, maybe you could. You probably wouldn't have been able to get in it on mine because it gapped over and took off and it didn't back up very much. So your chart could have been a little different. Maybe you could get in it. And of course, we're just walking down the trend channel line here before we come back. And we actually get a break here. But notice the low, first entry, second entry. That's a nice second entry short right there. Relatively bearish bar, relatively small. The first break of that trend line, it's right at the key entry points. I like that one. Lower high there, too bullish. And then you could look at that as a failed second entry long. But again, look at all that support across there and not much room. It would have worked. And but you've already got your break here and more than a couple of legs down. You've already got your break of this one. And that does give you a new low if it goes lower there, but we don't have one yet. So you might consider that one. It's a pretty big signal bar as well. I'm not going to make it red. But there's some reasons to want to like that trade. But I'll be honest with you, with no more room than that right there, I don't have my line on there, but let me just draw it, and then maybe you can see it a little better. There's not much room there. And if this thing doesn't push on through, you're not going to probably get out of that trade. You definitely don't want to be going long here. But it runs up. You get a little pullback here. It's a long way away from the EMA. You got 3 or 4 bars stacked up. It does push on up and come back and kind of confirms that trend line. And that's a relatively bullish bar. But I'm just not crazy about entering in here. You are looking for a reversal. And it is off that trend line. So that's another one if you want to be a little aggressive. It didn't break lower either, but it is off that key entry point. You got another one right there, but you've been way too far away from the EMA. And I'm not even going to give that one a green one. But notice what happens here. You get a break, first entry, and then you get a lower higher. So that would be a second entry long. And there's just enough room to get out there. You wouldn't have got 1 tick extra. So you might take that one. It's not back to the key entry point or anything. So I really think you're better off not to. But if you were paying attention and you saw that turns out to be a failed second entry long right there, still that far away from the EMA, I'd probably take that one. And again, you get just enough to get out before it does bounce. And so those are both, I mean, you could almost argue for that one to be green to the downside too. But I liked it just simply because we've been away from the EMA so long. And you got that little trap and a big bearish bar. So that's probably not a bad place to enter. And then we kind of continue to work higher, but I don't see any setups here that I like to the long side. You've already got a new high in right here. You got a break, and a new high. Most of the times you get two legs, but there's no setup here to really try to catch that second leg up. And then it reverses, runs down, it comes back. You get a lower high with a bearish bar, and I like going short right there just to look for another leg. There's your first leg right there, and then there's your second leg, a perfect measured move right there, equal distance, and there's two legs in this one. If that would have been more bearish, you might have looked at that one off that trend line, but it is right into those lows across there too, so probably better off just to skip that. And I got us in the 2 o'clock hour, so some good trades in here today. These kind of trends, when you get a good setup on a strong trend like this, you just take it. Sorry, I had a little interruption there, but I'm going to wrap it up for today. Back out of here and let you see this from a little higher. Backed out a little more than I really wanted there. I don't know what's going on with my chart. Anyway, you can see we had the trend up. We went sideways, trended down strongly, and then we recovered a little bit only to sell back off into the, and we've pretty much back down and near the overnight, back down near the daily lows again, or working towards there during the overnight here. This is all in this afternoon stuff. There we go. Got it a little bigger there. But anyway, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow afternoon. But again, no mid-morning chart tomorrow. I do have a dentist appointment, so I'll be out in the morning. But I'll be back to do the chart lesson tomorrow, so there will be a YouTube chart lesson. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.